Welcome Transformer fans, my name is Composite Enerjoe and today I'll be bringing you my review of the Transformers Power of the Primes Wave 3 Prime Masters. And from left to right we have Bludgeon, Octopunch, and Bomb Burst, which is the name of their decoy armors. And from right to left, the Sparks, the primes that they hold, the primes that are held within the armors are Megatronus, Solus Prime, and Quintus Prime. Oh, and for those of you who saw my Wave 1 review, I forgot to mention that Micronus is called Micronus Prime. It was Liege Maximo that doesn't get the title of Prime for some reason. But yeah, his name would be Micronus Prime. So yeah, so these are the Wave 3 Prime Masters. And to avoid repeating myself, I'm just gonna, I guess, say all of the basic stuff. I don't particularly like the Prime Masters. I consider them the worst part of Power of the Primes, among other things. And that I don't really recommend getting them unless either you're just gonna get one, or you find all of them, or you find a bunch of them like super cheap, like how I did. That's why I have these guys. I just found them dirt cheap on sale somewhere, and I just picked them up because why not? They're Transformers, they're cheap. Kind of hard for me to pass up an opportunity to get cheap Transformers. So yeah, and I'm just gonna show off one with a Bludgeon here. That their articulation is just their arms move. You can take off this piece and have them hold it so that the decoy armors can have. I said so that the decoy armors can be holding a weapon, and all of them can do that. And that's it. Also, each Prime Master has their own, has 3 modes, I guess. They have their armors, which has them inside of them. And when you take them out, you have the Prime Masters, which are these things. Oh, and I guess a slight update to that other video. I found out, yeah, these are the robots that, these are supposed to be like avatars of the primes that they're based on. Kind of. They're just, they basically just walk around with that power, and then when they combine with larger Transformers, they then give them the power. So here we have the Spark, which I'm just going to transform. This is the Spark of Quintus Prime. This is Quintus Prime, his Spark. And I don't think I mentioned this before, but I'll give him that the designs here are really neat. Design-wise, they look really good. It's the function and the repetition of that function that bothers me with the Prime Masters. So I'm not going to show them in their weapon modes, with Bludgeon being the one difference here. Like that instead of folding this all the way down, I just have it like this. I just straighten it out, because this is clearly supposed to be a club. This is actually a specific Japanese type of weapon, or like a Japanese cudgel, but I can't remember the exact name of it. But this is based on like an actual ancient Japanese weapon. And then you just combine it like so. And here we have Quintus Prime with Bludgeon here in his weapon mode. Next, let's go to Octopunch. And inside of Octopunch houses the Spark of, like I said, Solus Prime. There we go. This is Solus, his avatar Prime Master mode. This is her, yes, her, and I'll get into more details later, her Spark. Then for the weapon, you just fold this down and plug it in and fold this down. And if you look carefully, I think this is supposed to be some kind of aquatic crossbow. And I'm going to say now, actually, I think out of the 3, I really like this one, with Bludgeon being my second favorite of these 3. Because I like the name of Octopunch and the fact that it looks like a deep sea diver. It's such a unique design. I love it. And at first I thought this was some kind of axe weapon, but no, I think this is supposed to be a crossbow of some kind. So there's Octopunch and Solus. And then we have the familiar sounding Megatronus. So this is Bomb Burst. Take them out, fold it down, well, close up. Which The head sculpt does remind me of Megatron, which is fitting. Then transform, and this is Megatronus' spark. And again, I'll explain who the primes are, as well as like the abilities you might get. So fold this down, and if this looks familiar, yup. It wasn't bad enough that they copy pasted the same toy about like 8 times. They then copied the same weapon for Megatronus. Like you really couldn't give this guy a different weapon other than Liege Maximo's weapon. Like it's another like handheld claw. So yeah, this one really grinds my gears a bit. So yeah, here they are in their weapon modes, and for size comparison, here is Ratchet with his quarter, and those are the weapons. Again, they're not that big, but I guess they're big enough to work as weapons, even though it's just the robot flaying down. Alright, so let's get on with the actual primes, which, as I mentioned in my other video, to me is the most interesting thing about the Prime Masters. But again, I would have preferred if they actually made these primes into actual figures. I would have found that much better than just the sparks. Again, neat idea, not so neat of an execution. So first off, let's go with Quintus Prime. Now, who is Quintus and what abilities would you gain from this thing? Quintus Prime was out of the 13 primes, he was supposed to be the smartest one out of all of them. He was also idealistic. So if you could say that, how do I put it? If Liege Maximo was sort of the trickster and the manipulative one out of all of them, Quintus would sort of be the opposite, where he was idealistic. He basically believed that all life was precious and important, and he was apparently the most intelligent one out of all of them. Not only was he one of the strategists, not only was he one of the top strategists of the primes, he was also apparently the smartest one out of all of them in terms of like pure intellect. So Quintus here, it said that his mind was second to none. So I'm guessing that if you have his spark, a Transformer would gain super intelligence. That's just my guess. Then we come with Solus Prime, and as I hinted earlier, she was out of all the primes, she's the only female prime, and she is also the first female Transformer. So all Transformers that came after her were based off of her template. And this is her spark. Now what she did, she was the prime of creation. She was basically their blacksmith. She had the ability to just, with her forge, create anything. Some of the most, I guess, well-known artifacts that she created were the Star Saber, the Requiem Blaster, and the Apex Armor. She made all of those things and then some. And using her forge, which is obviously it's called the forge. The forge is just referred to as the Forge of Solus Prime, which just resembled a giant hammer that had an what's the word? It had an energy inside the hammer that when used could just make whatever you wanted or upgrade anything into anything else. So my guess would be that is her power. If you gain her spark, you would gain the ability to make whatever you wanted, like her forge. So that's pretty cool. And now the most, I don't want to say most interesting, but the most familiar sounding one is Megatronus. Megatronus has like I think a couple of different versions of his story, but he was originally referred to as the Fallen. If that sounds familiar, it should be. The Fallen was the main villain of the second Transformer movie's Revenge of the Fallen. So yeah, Megatronus was one of the 13 primes, and he ended up, again, depending on which version you look up, he ended up betraying the other primes and was then, I think he was banished banished to another dimension, and his name was like, I don't want to say erased, but one version was that the name was forgotten and he was only referred to as the Fallen. That was it. And I think more recently they then gave him the name of Megatronus. and sort of came up with the idea that Megatron looked up, was inspired by Megatronus, and then Megatron took the name and sort of altered it a bit. So he based his name off of Megatronus because he was inspired by him. And Megatronus, among the primes, I think was like the strongest one, but he had a sort of a chaos about him. He was very chaotic, he was angry, and apparently he had access to like Dark Energon. And I don't remember if it was that he found it and was given to him, or he was able to just create the Dark Energon. But he had like, he was just really powerful, but he was prone to darkness. And that's pretty much it. It's a very interesting story with a Megatronus, but he was the betrayer of the 13. And in one version, it led to the creation of the Decepticons. He was the one who started the Decepticons, with him being the first Decepticon, but that's one version of the story. I think in the most recent version of the story, he was just tricked by Liege Maximo into like betraying the others, and then he was just disbanded. It's a lot of information. I don't remember all of it, but yeah, it's very interesting, and I kind of recommend you kind of look into it. I found it to be very fascinating. So yeah, that's a Megatronus, and that's the figures. One other thing to mention is that Solus and Megatronus were in a relationship together. They started off as friends, but then it got romantic. Then eventually it spawned into a should I say spawned? Yeah, it spawned into a romantic relationship. Which, well, fun fact: Transformers, even though they are mechanical, non-biological mechanical organisms, can have relationships and even fall in love. They can, so there you go. It's a nice little extra factoid there. So yeah, this has been my review of the Transformers Power of the Primes Wave 3 Prime Masters. This is Composite Enerjoe, signing off. Peace out.